Good evening. This is a recording on Zoom of a presentation that was going to be delivered on the evening of the 27th of January 2022 for current Year 9 students and their parents. So, my name is Mr. Southall. I'm the Deputy Head Teacher for Curriculum at Harlington Upper School. Been at the school 9 years on the senior leadership team and always enjoy this point of the year because it's fantastic to see our Year 9 students and their parents or carers have those conversations that will start to shape their future pathways and decisions. The purpose of this PowerPoint presentation is to essentially guide you through the curriculum offering that we have at Harlington, the different choices that they will have, the options that they will have moving forward in terms of before the 7th of March, which will be their hand-in deadline, and to really give you some generic advice about how you can support your child in this process. I'm going to minimize my face now so that you don't have to watch me for the rest of the presentation so that you can focus on the slides. So, all Year 9 students who will be sat in the auditorium or who are watching this presentation are now, for the first time in their academic career, faced with options. Up until this point, the overwhelming majority of students, they have been told the subjects that they have to take and they have had no control. But at this seminal point, some might even say a rite of passage that you have been through and I've been through, you are asked to make a decision about the options that you're going to choose. Some students will feel very, very confident on this. They will know absolutely the subjects that they want to take for GCSE. They may have already decided at some point in Year 7 or Year 8 the subjects they want to take. Some will have absolutely no idea whatsoever, and some will have some idea but will be uncertain of others. So this PowerPoint and the next few weeks is designed to support those students in firming up their decisions. So, all Year 9 students will be thinking the following questions. What subjects would I like to choose for GCSE? How do I go about making this decision? And what are my options in terms of the different types of subjects and the different combinations that I can consider? So, here's our options timeline for 2022. All Year 9 students, if they're in school, received an assembly on the 24th of January, outlining the initial stages of this process. There is an options evening on the 27th of January, and obviously this recording is associated with that. From Monday, over the next 3 to 4 school weeks, all Year 9 students will also receive an interview with a member of the senior leadership team to help them and answer any questions that they might have. And then we ask that the options form are handed in on the 7th of March. That in essence gives students 5 weeks, including half term, to make this decision. We don't want students to rush this process. It's incredibly important, the reasons that will be outlined later, and it is not something that should be rushed through. We are here to support them. We want them to talk to you as much as possible, offer your advice with an adult lens about the subjects that would be right for them and any questions that they might have. Once that form is handed in on the 7th of March, then I begin the construction of the timetable and we start constructing groups. As this is an upper school, students then begin their GCSEs after May half term, what we term the rollover timetable. Having lost Year 13 and Year 11, we are in a privileged position, which is unlike the vast majority of schools in the country, where we can actually start our GCSE teaching from May, which gives students an additional 7 weeks compared to maybe peers across the country, which is certainly an advantage. So, there will be some terms that I mentioned tonight, and I'm very, very conscious that anybody viewing this presentation will come at this from different points of experience. There may be people watching this that are teachers themselves or have a huge experience within the educational world, and there may be those watching this that have absolutely sort of no awareness of sort of even some of the changes that have taken place in schools in recent years. So I would like to kind of give a brief overview. There's obviously a lot more information that I could deliver, but you know, in the spirit of sort of not going into too much detail, I'm just going to give you the headlines. So in schools now, students are graded on a scale of 1 to 9. Previously, or prior to 2016, it was graded A star to C to G. So 1 is the lowest grade, 9 is the highest. And I'll show a slide in a second as to how that correlates. The government aspires that all students achieve passes in their subjects, which is a grade 4, or you might hear the phrase a good pass, which is a grade 5. In old money, a grade 4 is a low C, a grade 5 is a higher C, but they are both seen as a pass. The Progress 8 measure has replaced the headline how many A stars to C have students got, and typically that was 5 A stars to C. So the Progress 8 school measure is designed to encourage schools to offer a broad and balanced curriculum, and it looks at how students have done across a range of subjects. These Progress 8 measures are grouped into 3 buckets. There is a bucket for English and Maths, a bucket for EBAC subjects, and then an open bucket for all other subjects. And a slide will follow shortly on that. Schools will also receive Attainment 8 scores, which is, in essence, how students have done in their subjects versus their expected progress. So students are compared nationally to their starting point, then they will be given a Progress 8 score, and then the expected Attainment 8 score is then taken away from their actual Progress 8 score. The EBAC, which is something that I would like to talk about, stands for the English Baccalaureate, and this is a grouping of subjects which is made up of English, Maths, Sciences, Languages, and a humanity such as history or geography. So, what does the GCSE timetable look like at Harlington? Well, at Harlington, at the minute, English and Maths for our students is 7 hours. This increases to 8 hours. Students can opt to take double award science, or they have the opportunity to do triple award science. If they choose to do triple award science, that counts as one of their options. So you would add 9 and 5 together to get to 14 hours. So if there are students viewing this PowerPoint who would like to do triple science, their timetable would look like 14 hours of science. If students don't want to do triple science, all students do double award science, which is 9 hours, which gets them 2 GCSE grades. At Harlington, we then offer students the options in 4 different areas. Some schools do 3 options, the vast majority of schools do 4, and that's the one that we've chosen. And that's where they will receive 5 hours of subject teaching for each of their respective choices. Students do 1 hour of character and ethics, which supports whole school enrichment and also form time activities and assemblies. And there is also 2 hours of core PE. It's worth noting that if students wish to do more core PE, they can do this through enrichment on Wednesday afternoon, upping their offering of sport. So we offer students at Harlington Upper School 25 different subjects to choose from. We see it as a very broad and balanced curriculum. We hope that there is something for everybody. You have your traditional humanities subjects, such as history, geography, and RS. You have your arts subjects, such as art, drama, music. And then you have subjects within technology. There's a big offering of subjects within IT and also PE, and also our triple science option. When students are taking these qualifications, there are also a range of titles. So for the vast majority of subjects, they are GCSEs, the General Certificate of Secondary Education. For some students, there will be BTech qualifications, which stands for Business and Technology from the Educational Council. And in essence, BTechs are subjects that are slightly more practical, slightly more vocational. There is still an exam in them, but there is a greater focus on completing coursework throughout the course as opposed to a final exam. If you pick child development, it's called the Cambridge Nationals, which is a variant of a BTech where it's even more practical, and RSL, which is a qualification within music. If you want to do the practical music qualification, once again, this is a qualification designed to support students being more practical within music as opposed to a final exam. But it is important to note that with all subjects, there will be examination. This has been the case since 2016. And if you've got children that are maybe slightly older than your current children who maybe went through those GCSEs before 2016, that is a significant change. Prior to 2016, some subjects were entirely coursework based, and this is different now. In all subjects, there is examination. So, how are students graded? I mentioned 9 to 1 a couple of slides ago. So in essence, you can see how it all correlates. So a grade 9, for example, is seen in old money as slightly higher than an A star. You might have heard in the news phrases mentioned such as a double A star. But in essence, if we start at kind of the middle point, a grade 4 is a C, but a grade 4 is seen as kind of a low C, as a standard pass. A grade 5 is seen as a good pass. It perhaps would have been a B- in old money, but all students should be aiming, if they can, to get more than a 4, and certainly looking at, with the profile of students we have at Harlington, moving towards 6s, 7s, 8s, and also 9s. An important point to note as well is how a BTech correlates to the 9 to 1 structure. Because BTechs are now not all coursework based and have examination basis, they should be seen on equal footings with GCSEs, and actually for some students they are very, very appropriate. If your child is somebody that is clear with what they want to do, for example, they might want to do health and social care when they're older, then something like child and development would be a very, very good qualification for them to be considering for GCSE. And you can see how the grade equivalent matches up. So for example, if you were to achieve a pass at BTech, it's the same as a 4 at GCSE. If, for example, you gain the highest grade, which is a distinction star at BTech, it's an 8.5. So just above an 8, in between a 9, but you can see that they are certainly seen on an equal footing. So I've mentioned the EBAC, and I've also mentioned the Progress 8 measure earlier. You may have seen this slide before. It's taken sort of directly from a government website, and it's widely shared. Students are essentially asked to pick subjects within these 8 areas, and there are 3 buckets. The first bucket is English and maths. And each of those are double weighted in terms of how measures are worked out. But for students at this school, all students will do English literature and English language. They will do maths, and that is the first bucket. Within bucket 2, which is the EBAC qualifications, students will be looked at in terms of the sciences, the computer science, the geography, the history, and the language that they study. And then the open bucket, which is the remaining EBAC qualifications. So for example, if you get, for example, a 7 in English literature, and you perhaps got a 5 in English language, the English language would count as one of those subjects in the open group. That's how those are measured. So what is the English Baccalaureate? Because I've mentioned it a couple of times already in this presentation, and I think it's important just to pause and actually be clear with what it is. The DfE, which is the Department for Education, describes the EBAC as a set of subjects at GCSE that keeps young people's options open for further study and future careers. The government, in essence, would like, by 2022, all students in the country to be thinking about the EBAC, and they have put a performance level or a number of students as a percentage of 75%. They would like this number to rise to 90% by 2025. The EBAC has been in the press since around 2010, and the government in the last 2 weeks have announced further reforms to ensure that 90% of students are aspiring to do the EBAC qualification by 2025. It is seen as a measure of success, therefore, in core subjects, for example, as I said, English, maths, history, geography, or the sciences, and it's allowing students to keep a broad and balanced curriculum for as long as possible. It is absolutely ambitious. And Ofsted say that EBAC should be at the heart of the school. There is some evidence out there from an organisation called the Sutton Trust, which is a very, very important think tank within education, that says it can improve students' performance in English and maths if they take the EBAC because of the skills that are learnt and transferred, those transferable skills in humanities and also a language. And also it will make sure that students are not disadvantaged in future jobs markets by having this broad range of subjects when they are being asked essentially at the age of 13 or 14 to start narrowing their choices. It is our strong belief at this school that we believe that all students should be given the opportunity to study the English Baccalaureate. So what does the EBAC look like then? So all students would do English and maths. Students, as part of the EBAC middle bucket, would be doing sciences. So buckets 3 and 4 would be filled with science. And then if you were to study the EBAC, we would ask students to pick either history or geography as the humanity, and French or Spanish as the other option within that profile. Okay, so they would have to pick history or geography or French and Spanish. We expect that this will apply to most students in the year group based on their academic profile and based on the ambition that they should have. It is fair to say that with students of a similar starting point, so in terms of their academic potential in schools across the country, that they should all be thinking about doing the EBAC as an option. Once students have picked English, history or geography or French and Spanish, that still leaves them with 2 other subjects that they can do. So some students may choose to do triple science. Some students may choose to go down the arts and say, for example, I'd quite like to do music and I'd like to do drama. Some students might want to pick a technology. Some students might want to take, for example, a new subject such as media. But by offering 4 subjects, once the students have picked history, geography, or French and Spanish, that still gives them 2 other options. We also recognise that the government target is that for 75% of students to do the EBAC by 2022 and for 90% of students to do the EBAC by 2025. So within their own measures, that is not for everybody. So whilst we're going to offer the English Baccalaureate for everybody, we don't want anybody to feel that they can't do that profile of subjects, there will be some students where it is not appropriate. This might be that, for example, they have already decided on their future chances in terms of the courses they want to take. They might even thought this is what I want to do at college and the EBAC doesn't quite fit. Equally, there may be unique circumstances to a child where they're feeling that actually doing a history, geography or a language is not necessarily the right thing for them if they perhaps have higher order needs or complex needs. So what we will be asking is that for those students that don't pick the EBAC route, that they still have to do history, geography, French or Spanish. They have to pick one of those. And that is so that that middle bucket, bucket 2, is complete. Okay, so it's already filled with English and maths and the double award science, and students would be expected to pick history, geography, French or Spanish. So that's probably a really, really important point to pause on and just recap. So we expect most students in year 9 at Harlington, based on their profile, based on our ambition, based on ensuring that they have a broad and balanced curriculum, to be doing the EBAC route. That means that as part of their subjects, as part of this decision process, they need to decide whether or not they're going to study history or geography or French or Spanish. And then they will need an additional 2 GCSE options. For those students where the EBAC isn't entirely right for them, or they don't see how it fits with their future career pathways, they need to pick history, geography, French or Spanish. So, common mistakes that students make. There should be no surprises here, but it is important to think about working through each of these. Often, students will pick a subject based on their current teacher. So, for example, they might love their art teacher or their drama teacher, and they might pick that subject based entirely on that teacher. In all departments, there are more than one teacher, with the exception of music at the minute, and therefore it might well be that they don't have their favourite teacher teaching them. Probably the biggest mistake that students make is what their friends are doing. Of course, friends influence one another. Peers are a very, very important influence as teenagers on one another. However, please think about how it fits with you and if that subject is right. Firstly, it doesn't mean that you'll be in the same group as your friends. You're at this stage now academically where you're starting to have to make decisions for yourself, but also your friends have perhaps got a clearer idea as to what they would like to do, and it might not necessarily fit with what would be appropriate for you. For some subjects, they do offer a gateway to post-16. So for example, when you're going around tonight and speaking to the department leaders for respective subjects, it may well be that you ask the question, does it limit not being able to do that? So for example, if you want to study computer science at A level, there is a requirement, for example, that you do computer science at GCSE. It's the same with a subject like languages. So for example, if you wanted to do French or Spanish at A level, you would have to have studied it because the gap would be too great in terms of being able to study it at post-16. Some students think that subjects will be easy. This is a common mistake because they either sound easy in title or they think there'll be less writing. And I've got a slide to show you that has some important points for you to be aware of and also talk through with your children. And also not listening to adults. Teenagers obviously feel, well, some of them certainly feel that they know best. We as adults are here to guide our children and to advise them. We know perhaps mistakes that we made when we were younger, but also we're looking at through an adult lens as to the world that we live in. It might not necessarily be to a student at the minute that they want to study history or geography or French or Spanish, but actually in terms of saying this will give them that broad range of subjects. So for potential jobs, it shows that they're able to do a range of subjects. So when they get their GCSE grades, they've got a range of grades. So the employer might say this person is an all-rounder, or they have certain skills. So for example, in history, the skills of analysis are there, or perhaps in geography, a wider awareness of the world. And so that's a conversation to be having with students. So within the options booklet that you've all got, if I just pick up on the changes that have been made post 2016, and also maybe a perception from some students that certain subjects are easy, it's really, really important when looking at what subject is right to look at the assessment route. So some of the students saw this in assembly for the top 2 on Monday of this week, So if I perhaps jump to music, for example, you can see, for example, on music that the syllabus, okay, is at Excel. You can see that it's graded 9 to 1. But you can see that there is a written paper worth 40%. There is a performance worth 30% and a composition worth the other 30% to get to 100%. So music GCSE is still a 40% written exam. If you look at GCSE food and nutrition, for example, you might be thinking, well, if I do food, all I'm going to be doing is cooking. Well, that is obviously the case for 50% of the time, because 50% of the end examination point is practical. However, there is still a 50% written exam. And that's really, really important to emphasize that these changes in 2016 really did emphasize the need for a practical side, but also a written side to maybe subjects that have traditionally been all non-examination. There also will be subjects where students are thinking, which one should I do? Because they offer either a GCSE or a BTech within that respective subject. So for example, within media, one of our really popular subjects, you can do media GCSE or you can do BTech media study. This evening is a great opportunity to speak to Mrs. Smith, for example, who's the subject lead, to talk through kind of those options. But also, if you have a look again at the assessment route, apologies for the bell, obviously recording during school time. The non-exam assessment, which stands for NEA, is 30%, which is completed in class, and then there are 2 exams. So for example, with GCSE media, 70% of the examination to reach your grade is actually produced in the exam hall, whereas you can see actually with the media studies that it's 100% coursework. It's one of our few qualifications where it is 100% coursework. That may well be very appealing to students who don't like examination, but it also will require an awful lot of work to be produced during the course to ensure that obviously all the standards for that BTech are met. Cambridge National, for example, in child development, you can see that there are 2 controlled assessments worth 60% plus 1 written paper, which is worth 40%. So please, when you're talking with your students, your son or daughter, sorry, I should say I'm using teacher speak there. When you're speaking with your son and daughter, please really, really give them some guidance on that and talk to them and make sure that they are clear with how they will be assessed. Another thing just to finally think about is careful consideration about combinations. It is advised not to study economics and business together, computer science and BTech ICT, art and textiles, a BTech PE and a GCSE PE, or more than 2 BTechs because of the sheer amount of coursework. There are reasons for that, and the subject leaders are the best people to speak to you about that. But in essence, trying to ensure that your curriculum is broad and balanced and giving you a range of subjects is a starting point. But sometimes there is perhaps too much overlap between the 2 and it can confuse students. So, as we approach the end of this presentation, all parents should now have a copy from arrival this evening of the Year 9 into 10 options booklet. And obviously you have the rooms that you can go to. It's also worth just flagging as well that the child development will be in the technology area, and that the Duke of Edinburgh, there is a representative in the street, Mrs. Cavadiers, who will talk to you if your children are interested in doing Duke of Edinburgh. So, what to do next? At the back of your options booklet, there are 2 forms, and this is what we need returned to form tutors by the 7th of March. It can be earlier, but if we can have those forms by the 7th of March, that will allow us to be in construction of the timetable. They have to be returned by the 7th of March. Students are not put on a first come, first served basis into groups. However, if we haven't received the form by the 7th of March, unless there's obviously a very, very good reason, we will have to allocate subjects to students where there are spaces. So, as I outlined earlier, for the vast majority of students, we expect them to be doing the EBAC route. Okay, so the EBAC route is where they, for step 1, would be selecting geography or history. Step 2, they'd be selecting French or Spanish, and then 2 different subjects. And you can see how the subjects are spread across different blocks. The blocks are designed to allow students to be able to take subjects where possible across multiple blocks. And you can see that, for example, if you wanted to take geography in block 4, for example, that doesn't limit you taking art, because art is also available in block 3 and also block 2. Subjects are therefore available in at least 2 different blocks to allow students this combination. We also ask students to put down reserved subjects. It is very, very rare that we have to refer to reserved subjects, but if that is the case, then I will contact you personally once this is started, and also the student to say that we are having to revert to reserved subjects. But in the last 5 years that I put this process together, it has been very, very rare that that's taken place. If anything, it's been because a subject hasn't run, because that cohort, for example, were maybe leaning towards maybe another subject other than another. But as I said, that's very, very rare. For those students that are completing the non-EBAC route, they will need to select history or geography or a language, and they will also need to think about doing different forms in terms of obviously thinking about, so for example, if they wanted to pick history or geography or French or Spanish, that would be one of their choices, and then they would pick 3 additional ones. Please note, and this is very, very, very important, we cannot change student options once they're submitted unless there is a clear justification for the request. The 7th of March allows 5 weeks from this starting point for students to think about the options that they want to do. It is designed to be deliberately long. They will have their one-to-one interviews with a senior member of staff. They will have this evening. They'll obviously have 4 or 5 weeks, including half term, to talk to you as parents about the subjects that they want to do. A good starting point, for example, might be to write down the subjects that you definitely want to do. And if there are any that you're uncertain of, then spend the next couple of weeks working through this process. It is not possible, once we start putting the timetable together and working out class sizes and class numbers, for students to chop and change. Where this has happened in the past, it has largely been driven by people wanting to be their friends, and it makes a smooth operating of the school and the timetable and option class sizes impossible. When we put together these groups, if, for example, in block 4, there are 60 students that want to do art, we would obviously create 2 or 3 groups from that. If later down the line, 10 or 15 students say, I don't want to do that subject, can I change to another subject? It means that it upsets the balance of the teaching groups. So please, unless there is an absolute clear justification, and that would be very, very, very rare, it has to be submitted in writing, please, to myself. Once the form is handed in on the 7th of March, that is the final choice of your child. So, as this evening comes to an end, just to be clear, we've had the options evening tonight on the 27th of January. Over the next 5 weeks, students please make their choices. Once they're ready, please can they submit their options form on the 7th of March to their form tutor, and then the timetable will be constructed. So, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to ask your son or daughter to find me in school or to email me personally, and I'll get back to you. Thank you very much for listening, and I wish you all the best in this process.